Hey everyone, how are you? So if you didn't know, I have been working on this customizable dashboard in Angular for the past several months on my channel. So you can see that we can actually change the height and the widths, and we can change the positions of our widgets here. We can also remove our widgets from here to here so that we can truly customize our dashboard experience for the user. But one thing that was missing was that it was only syncing on local storage till now. So the user could have this configuration saved on his local machine only using local storage. Well, I improved upon this further and I have now synced this with Firebase Firestore. So that in effect means that we are now going to have a completely personalized user dashboard for each user, okay? And the user can access it from anywhere around the world on any device just by using its login. Okay, so let's see this in action. So we have our John Doe, who is just a dummy user that I've added for the time being, and the dashboard says like this. Now, whatever change we make here is going to get synced, the positions and everything. And then we log out and then we log in with zoeb@khan.com, which is the other user. So once we log in with the other user, you can see that the layout and everything is completely different. Now let's change this layout a bit. Let's add a new widget here. Let's say we add a latest comments widget here, and let's close this and let's log out and let's go to John Doe again. And you can see John Doe has that same layout that it had previously. So the app now remembers that using the power of Firestore. Now in this video, I'm going to show you exactly how I did this. And we're going to use Firestore to sync this. And we are also going to use Ngrx Signal Store and its superpower. I'm going to mention that somewhere in the middle of the video. Its special function called the Rx method, which is a reactive method. And this makes it really, really clean for us to achieve the syncing effect so that every data that we change is synced completely with Firebase Firestore. And just as an aside, if you are on the lookout for a good Angular starter template to start your project with, you can check out this dashboard. It's available on my shop. The link you'll get in the description. And it has a dark mode. You can see here it has a nice little dashboard as I showed you, and it has all of the components, material components, a nice sidebar here, and it has Tailwind integrated. It uses all of the latest signal-based features, and especially the Ngrx Signal Store for state management, which makes your life really easy when building large projects. If you get it at this price point, you are going to get all of the lifetime updates for free as well. Okay, so without further ado, let's get started. So this is our state that we are going to be starting this video with, and this is the empty state. That means that there is no syncing currently, so that it doesn't get any data from anywhere and it's not saving data from anything. Of course, you can add your widgets here, but if you refresh, you're going to lose all of that data because there's no syncing for that. So the first thing I want to cover is a bit of a structure of the app so that you can know how we are working with this. So we have this dashboard component, as you can see here in my files here. I have this dashboard, and then within that I have a dashboard component. So this is the first layer. Now the component basically is connected to the store. So we use the store functions, which is the Ngrx Signal Store, the best store for signal-based apps in the latest Angular versions. And then this store actually then goes on and calls in the dashboard service. Okay. So this service is empty right now because they haven't implemented anything here. But so this is the basic structure. So the component calls the store and the store calls the service to implement it. So this is a three-layered architecture, you can say. And the store is basically the brain which actually does everything. Okay, so let's go to the store and see in a bit more in detail about how the state is managed here. So we have here the order of the widgets. I've kept the order separate from the widgets itself because sometimes you just change the position and you don't want to update the widgets themselves. You just want to change the order of the widgets, okay? And then you have, you're using the with entities. That means we are using the entities feature. Now this is also a feature of the Ngrx Signal Store. I'm not going to go into detail here in this overview. So if you want more information about that, you can check out my other video in which I actually tell you about why I love the Ngrx Signal Store and all of the features that it provides. So one feature of that is a custom feature that we can add in a Signal Store. With entities is a sort of a built-in feature that I have used to manage the widgets here. It provides easy CRUD operations that we can use to manipulate our widgets. Below that, obviously, we have our methods. We use these methods to add widget at the position, to update specific widgets when the user is changing the settings, the height and width, etc. And to remove widgets from the dashboard, to update the widget position, okay? So this is just a basic rundown of the structure of my app, okay? Now I tell you all about this because once we need to figure out what data we need to actually store on the Firestore database. So in this case, we have two sets of data. So one is the array of the order of the widgets, and the other is the array of the widgets that we have, which is represented by the entities here. Okay, let's create an interface that is going to represent this data. So what we're going to do is, let's create a type, in fact, and let's call this a user dashboard. Okay, this user dashboard is going to have the widgets and the order here. Okay, and since Firestore is a document-based database, no SQL database, we can just simply save this whole object for each of the user. Okay, so this will be one document for each of the user. Okay, so before we move on to actually implementing our dashboard service functions, let's first see what the structure of the data would be in Firestore document. So you can see that we have our Cloud Firestore open here, the console open here, and I have a dashboards collection that I'm using to store all of my dashboard configurations for each user. And since each user ID is unique, I am using the user ID as the key of each document. Okay, and you can see here that I already have the data for the two because I was testing it before. So you can see that I simply have an order array here and a widgets array here with all of the data like this. Now you can keep a special collection for sub collection for widgets as well. But since widgets are usually limited in number, it's really fine to actually just use a normal array for the purpose to save it. So here what we expect here then is that we need this data, which we'll already have, but we also need the UID here. So in our function that we implement, we'll also need to access the authenticated user. Okay, so let's go back to our code and let's see where we get the authenticated user from here. Okay, so I already have that set up, and if you want more information about that, you can check out one of my previous videos on authentication. If I go in my shared services here, you can see that I have auth service here, and here I have a user signal. So this signal basically represents the currently authenticated state of the user. And when we open the dashboard, basically we are already authenticated because our authentication guard does not let us move forward from the login page if we are not actually authenticated. So once we reach the dashboard and we call these functions, we are going to be rest assured that our user is going to be a valid user and it will have a valid user ID so that we can use it in our dashboards and get that data. Okay, so let's inject our auth service here so that we can use that. So let's do auth service and inject auth service here, add import from there, and let's also add import here. And then secondly, we need a reference to the Firestore database. And for that, I already have a Firebase service as well, which is basically a global service where I specify my Firebase API keys, etc. And I also expose the application, the auth, and the DB here if I want to use it in anywhere in my app. So in the dashboard service, then we are going to do DB is equals to inject Firebase service DB. Okay, let's define a collection here because we're going to use this collection in all of the functions. So let's say that we say dashboards collection. Okay, so this will be, let's get a collection from import from Firebase Firestore here. And the name is going to be dashboards here like this. And we're going to refer to the DB here, which we get from the Firebase service. Again, if you want more information about how I set this Firebase up, that's all there in the user authentication video that I created previously, implementing this in the dashboard. Okay, so dashboard collection is here. Now we need to implement the fetch dashboard function to get all of the data initially when we load the dashboard. So the first thing we need to do, as our AI is suggesting here itself, is we need to get the user from the auth service here. Okay, we also need to cast it to user because it can also be null initially. Next, what we want to do is we want to get a reference to our dashboard document. In fact, we can say docref, and this is going to be a doc. Let's import this from Firebase Firestore. Going to refer to the dashboard collection and is going to get the user.uid here. Okay, and of course we get a snapshot from here. So what we're going to do is we are going to do constant snapshot and we're going to do get doc here. Okay, now this involves an await, so we need to have an async here. Okay, so we are going to import get doc. From this we're going to give doc reference here. Okay, now one thing we need to check here is that whether there is any document available there. So if there's no document available there, which will be the first time anybody signs up, we are going to create that dashboard document there. So for that, we are going to test if snapshot exists, and if it does not exist, in fact, we are going to do a new dashboard. Okay, and this new dashboard is going to be empty because we don't have any widgets here. We don't have any widgets here. The order as well is going to be empty here. Okay, and then we are going to save the doc here by using the set doc. We're going to use the same doc reference because we already have a reference to that specific document. Okay, great. So this new dashboard is returned now. That is the initial case where we don't have a document. And when this is not the case, then we just want to, it says that we just want to return snapshot.data as a user dashboard. But again, there was this one complexity that this data will not have the content and our dashboard needs the content as well. So here, what we're going to do at the service level is we're going to refer to the widgets directory and we're going to get that here. Okay, so let's say that we're going to do snapshot.data as user dashboard, and then for each of the data, but for each widget, what we're going to do is we're going to find that widget data here by using the ID here. And then we're going to check if there is any widget data here. And then we're going to assign that to the content of the widget data. Okay. So now we have our content or the components to render for the specific widgets as well. And then we're going to just return that data here. Okay. Great. So our fetch dashboard seems to be complete. Okay, so let's go on and create the rest of the two functions here. So it's suggesting here that we create a save widgets function, and that's correct because we want to do it separately, the widgets and the order. So let's create a save widgets function here. We have the widget type here, and now we have a sort of a layout for how we should do this. Hopefully our AI can also understand this. So first we get the user here as before, then we specify the doc, the user doc here. And then one thing that we need to do in the save widgets is basically we need to remove the content, the component content before we send it in the document. So what we're going to do is that we are going to first create a widgets without content structure here, and it will be type partial because it won't have the content here. And here we're going to map it to the same thing. And then for each of them, we are going to loop through them and delete the content here like this. Okay. This ensures that we won't have the content when we actually save it to our Firestore DB. Great, and then we are going to just call return update doc here. Okay, and let's also return here and let's call this promise void. Okay, great. So update doc is a function which is different from set doc. The set doc is going to replace the whole document, but here only the property that we have specified here is going to get updated. Let's also do the same thing for save order, and this will be comparatively simpler. So let's do the same thing, user dashboard collection, and this is relatively easier. We just use the update dot directly because there's no complication here. Okay, so we have these three functions here. Let's also add some console statements here so that we can actually see when these are going to get called. This is going to be helpful when we actually debug and find out issues in the syncing process when we do it in dashboard store. Okay, so now we're going to move on to the dashboard store where we're going to actually reveal the superpower that the Ngrx signal store provides us, and that is the Rx method. Okay, and of course, if you're just interested in looking at the code and you want to look into this code into a bit more detail than I'm explaining here, you're most welcome to get this from my shop. The link again is going to be in the description. Okay, so before we start on the dashboard store here, let's just add the functionality for fetching the widgets because it doesn't involve using any reactive methods. So we just need to create a simple method here called fetch dashboard, and this method is going to basically just use the dashboard service which we haven't injected right now. So we can inject this service here like this. Let's import this from the top, and here then we're going to call the dashboard service fetch dashboard function, and we're going to get our widgets and the order, and then we're going to use the add entities function of the Ngrx signal store entities custom feature. So we're going to add the widgets as entities to the Ngrx signal store and also the order. So we're going to patch in both of these, and of course we're going to do this in a start view transition so that it's all consistent with all of the other changes that we have when we add or remove widgets here. Now, in case you want to know more about the view transitions and why we have done this, I have a whole video on this in which I explain how I added view transitions to make this the seamless transitions that you saw when I was making the changes to my dashboard widgets. So be sure to check that out if you're interested. Okay, so fetch dashboard is implemented, but a question is that where do we actually use this fetch dashboard? Okay, now to explain that, let's go to our dashboard component here. And when you go in the dashboard component, you're going to see that we have provided the dashboard store here. Now this means that the store is basically attached to the dashboard component, is initializes when the component initializes. And when does the component initialize? Well, the component initializes when we go to the root of this, and this is a lazy loaded root. So if, for example, you go in content here and you refresh this, the dashboard root is not loaded as yet. When we click on dashboard, it's going to load the dashboard root at that point. Okay, so this is the point where we actually want to use the dashboard, and this is exactly the point where we actually want to fetch the dashboard as well. So we want to fetch it on ng on init for this dashboard component. We can do this here, but we can also do it on the store because their life cycles are basically the same. So let's do it in the store. So because all of our functionality is basically resting in the store. Okay, so let's add a with hooks here. Okay, so here we're going to specify our on init, and then we're going to do store.fetch dashboard here like this. Great. So time to test this out. And now you can see we have our dashboard here in all its glory. And we had also added a fetch dashboard console.log so we can see our service is being used correctly. This is because we already had the data that we needed in our order and our widgets here. Okay. We can also test it out on the other user. So on Zwabe here, and you can see that it gets its data as well. Okay. So how do we sync it to the Firestore when we make any change to the dashboard? So the traditional way would be to actually add this in each of our functions here. So you can say that we have add widget position. Before this, when we have made the changes to the data, we can actually do await dashboard service or save order and await dashboard service dot save widgets here like this. And we can do the same thing in update widget. We can do the same thing in remove widget, and we can do the same thing here. And you get the idea that we have to call all of these functions in each of the functions in which we are manipulating the state. But what if we could make this simpler and cleaner? What if we could just set it up so that whenever the order or the widgets change, it automatically syncs with Firestore? Well, we can do that, but to do that, we need to introduce the Rx method, which is a superpower that the Ngrx signal store provides. Now, Rx method is not a normal function. It's basically an observable chain. It's sort of like an effect in component store. So you can pass in Rx method a static value. A static value is going to call the function only once. Then we can also pass in an observable. So if you pass in an observable, the Rx method is called whenever that observable emits a new value. And then it also allows a signal. So that means if you pass in a signal and the signal changes value, it's going to automatically call that function, thus enabling that reactive feature that we actually want. Okay. So what we're going to do, instead of doing it in each of our methods here when we are manipulating the dashboard, we are going to do it only at one place. So first we're going to create a save widgets Rx method here, and it's imported from ngrx.js inter op, and we have to give the type, and within that then we have to give our pipe here directly. Okay, and in this pipe obviously we need to import this pipe here and the switch map here. We can just simply call the dashboard service save widgets here like this. Okay, now this means that if we set it up with our widget signal, the store widgets, it's going to call the save widgets whenever that changes. Okay, we haven't set it up. We're going to do that after this. So let's also add the RS save order here as well. Let's do Rx method, the number, and we do the same thing just in a similar way. And where do we set it up? So we're going to set it up in the onInit as well. But the fetch dashboard is just a single function, so it's going to get called only once. But for the save order and the save widgets, it's going to get called whenever the signal changes. So we're going to do store.saveWidget. And now here AI has suggested to us that we send in the signal value because, well, the AI is not up to the trends. So the AI doesn't know that we can actually send in a signal itself as well, and that's going to make it reactive. So we don't want to send the value here. Be sure to make that distinction. And we also don't need to send the added widgets here. We want to send the entities, which represents the widgets in our case, without the brackets, because we don't want to send the value. We want to send the signal itself. Now, if you want to check the type here, you can check the type here that it is signal of the widget array. Okay, great. The same thing we need to do for our save order here. And here we also don't send the value here. We're going to send the signal itself. Great. So now we don't have to worry about giving the dashboard sync statement in all of these functions here. We can just worry about the dashboard, the entities and the order changing. We are not concerned with when it changes, how it changes. We're only concerned with whether it changes, and whenever it will change, it's going to call the save function, thereby ensuring that all of our data is always remaining in sync with our Firestore database. So this should theoretically work, right? So let's save this and let's try it out. So let's go in our dashboard again, and we can see that we don't have any data here. Now, why is that? And you can see here why we don't have any data. So you can see here that initially we called the fetch dashboard. That is fine. It was fetching the dashboard. And then you can see initially we also called the save widget, save order, and save order. Now, why is save widgets being called initially? That is simply because signals always have an initial value. And since we set up our reactive functions here, this is going to get called even on the initial values, okay? And in fact, two sets of initial values. So the first set of initial value will be when we initialize the store, and that would be the initial state of these values, and that's going to trigger the save order and the save widgets as well, okay? The second one would be when we actually fetch the widgets. And when we fetch the widgets initially, it's going to trigger the save order and save widgets again, because in that we are patching the state and we are changing the dashboard state. So how do we handle this? Well, since we have our RxJS observable stream here, we can actually use the RxJS skip operator to skip those initial two calls. Okay, so let's add these skips here before the switch map. So we're going to do skip, import this, and we're going to skip two of these here. Okay, skip here, and we're going to get a skip here as well. Okay, now let's test this out again. And now as well, you can see that it's empty, and that is because it has already synced the empty state in my previous iteration when I was testing. So I have basically an empty order and widgets data. So let's build that up again. Just let's build our channel analytics here again, our views here again, and our watch time here again. And let's see whether we are getting synced here as well. You can see everything is getting synced. Let's see latest comments here. You can see that save widgets and save order here. If you only change the order here, you can see that it only saves the order here, okay? And then the moment of truth, let's also check out whether our data is here correctly. Okay, so our data is here correctly. It's syncing with Firestore. And when we refresh it, it should only fetch the dashboard. It should not sync it immediately. Okay, let's refresh this. And when we refresh this, you can see that we have our fetch dashboard being called only. It's not syncing it initially. All right. And if you want to change it again, you can see that now it starts syncing it, skipping the first two calls. Okay. So now you have a really clean way using just these three functions and the power of Rx method to actually have a completely synced dashboard configuration personalized for every user in your application. Let's log out and let's test in my user as well, Zoeb Khan here. And you can see I already had this here, so I can shift it here. It's pretty big here, so I can edit this and make this smaller. And I can refresh this and check this out again. So if I check it out again, it remembers my, let's also do this one here. And you can see everything is synced properly as we would want it to. Okay. And of course, you can now do it in a similar way with Supabase or with any other REST API as well. If you have a REST API in which you can persist this dashboard data to your own backend API, it's all really doable using this structure that I've provided. Okay. Now you might be wondering, is this the end of the dashboard? Because this is sort of the culmination of what I started off as a customizable dashboard several months ago. But I'm happy that I've achieved this much till now, but there is a lot more to come. And I'm going to build this up more in the coming weeks. I'm going to add in the next iteration, I think I'm going to add a real nice form section, a material form section, which is going to make creating forms easier for you if you're using Angular material, especially when you're creating large forms. And again, if you are interested in such a starter template, be sure to check out the link in the description. Again, if you get it at this price point at this time, you are going to get all of the future updates, lifetime updates for free. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time with another interesting video related to Angular development.